Hello everyone, Rihanna here. Now we are going to listen to podcast news which includes national, international and business, economy, news. While walking in the morning or evening, while cooking, cycling or during free time you can listen. It will enhance your learning and understanding of various accents and pronunciations. Listening improves the quality of communication and comprehension. Before going ahead, I would like to welcome you all to the virtual school. A new way of learning and teaching, with the vision of Let's Grow Together. Our mission is to learn how to learn and teach how to teach. So stay tuned. And here we go. June 12, 2021. Important national news. Center unlikely to allow return of 4 Kerala women, who joined IS. They had surrendered after their husbands were killed in attacks. Vijata Singh Suhasini Hyder, New Delhi. The 4 Indian women lodged in an Afghanistan prison, who accompanied their husbands to join the Islamic State in Khorasan province, ISKP, are unlikely to be allowed to return to the country, a senior government official said. The women, all from Kerala, travelled to Nangarhar in Afghanistan between 2016 and 2018. Their husbands were killed in different attacks in Afghanistan. The women were among thousands of Islamic State fighters and affiliates who surrendered before the Afghanistan authorities in the months of November and December 2019. On April 27, Ahmed Zia Siraj, the head of the National Directorate of Security, told reporters in Kabul that 408 members of the Islamic State from 13 countries are lodged in Afghanistan prisons. This included 4 Indians, 16 Chinese, 299 Pakistanis, 2 Bangladeshis, and 2 from the Maldives, among others. Mr. Siraj also said the Afghanistan government had begun talks with the 13 countries to deport the prisoners. While Afghan officials in Delhi declined to comment, senior officials in Kabul indicated that they awaited word from India on what it proposes to do. A source, however, said there was no consensus among various government agencies on the return of the 4 women and it was unlikely that they would be allowed to come back. The women, accompanied by their children, were interviewed by Indian security agencies in Kabul in December 2019, a month after their surrender. In March 2020, stratnewsglobal.com, a strategic affairs website, published a video of the interrogation of the 3 women. The 4 women who appeared in the video were identified as Sonia Sebastian, alias Aisha, Refila, Marin Jacob, alias Mariam, and Nimisha, alias Fatima Isa. A senior official added that there were 2 other Indian women and a man who had surrendered to the authorities. Highly radicalized. One line of thought was to allow them to come back and become approvers in the cases here. However, their interview revealed that they are highly radicalized. The France model may be followed and the Afghanistan authorities can be requested to put them on trial there, said the official. The Interpol has issued red notices against the women on India's request. The National Investigation Agency, NIA, had filed a charge sheet in 2017 after a group of 21 men and women from Kerala, including Sebastian, left India in 2016 in batches to join the ISKP in Afghanistan. They crossed over to Afghanistan on foot from Iran. The NIA said Sebastian, from Kasaragod in Kerala, had left India on May 31, 2016, with her husband, Abdul Rashid Abdullah, from Mumbai airport. The agency said, the couple held secret classes in support of IS and Jihad, as propagated by it, during last part of Ramadan. Modi meets Adityanath, Amit Shah to iron out issues. U.P. CM asked to take everyone along in party and government. Key talks, Prime Minister Narendra Modi with Uttar Pradesh CM Yogi Adityanath in New Delhi on Friday. PTI/@PMO India. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday had meetings with Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath as well as Union Home Minister Amit Shah and BJP President JP Nadda to sort out what are said to be several internal issues within the party and the government, including a possible cabinet reshuffle. The state of play in the BJP's state unit and the party-run government seem to be more or less settled in favour of Mr. Adityanath. The meeting between Mr. Modi and Mr. Adityanath lasted for over an hour. After this, the Chief Minister met Mr. Nadda and called on President Ram Nath Kovind. Sources close to Mr. Adityanath said his meetings with Mr. Modi and Mr. Nadda were to do with governance and the coming assembly poll next year. He was asked to take everyone along in both the party and the government, accommodate various interests in the party, and may expand his council of ministers sooner rather than later. The Provincial Expressway is also going to be ready for inauguration by July 31 and an invitation for the ceremony was extended to the Prime Minister. The start of groundwork of the proposed Jawhar Airport was also discussed, said a source. Mukul Roy rejoins Trinamool welcomed by Mamta. He says she is the leader of the entire country. Back in the team, Mukul Roy with West Bengal Chief Minister Mamta Banerjee and Trinamool National General Secretary Abhishek Banerjee in Kolkata on Friday. Pti. Shiv Sahaj Singh Kolkata. The repercussions of the BJP's comprehensive defeat in the West Bengal Assembly poll continued more than a month after the results were declared, with party Vice President Mukul Roy on Friday returning to the Trinamool Congress. One of the founding members of the party, Mr. Roy had switched to the BJP in November 2017. Chief Minister and Trinamool Congress chairperson Mamta Banerjee and Party General Secretary Abhishek Banerjee were at the party headquarters to welcome Mr. Roy, 67. An effusive Mr. Roy described Ms. Banerjee as a leader of the entire country. He said he was feeling relieved after quitting the BJP. I feel glad to meet all the old faces again. I feel that Bengal will return to its old position of prestige, and the person who will lead Bengal to that position, she is the leader of all of us, the leader of India, none other than Mamta Banerjee, he said. In the present circumstances, no one can stay in the BJP in Bengal, he added. Ms. Banerjee, in turn, described Mr. Roy as an old family member and added that old is always gold. Mukul is an old member of our family. I feel that upon coming back he has got some mental relief. I saw his health was deteriorating and he was perhaps unable to express that. It is not possible to work in the BJP. The BJP is such an authoritarian party, it is so cruel that they do not allow anybody to exist with dignity. Mukul's return proves just that, Ms. Banerjee said. Pointing that she never had any difference of opinion with Mukul and Mukul did not say anything against our party. The Chief Minister alleged that the former railway minister was intimidated, threatened, agencies were brandished to harass him. Ms. Banerjee added that many more leaders from the BJP may join Trinamool. SC rejects ex-Mumbai police chief's appeal case won't be shifted from Maharashtra. Parambir Singh. Krishnadas Rajagopal, New Delhi. The Supreme Court on Friday told former Mumbai Police Chief Parambir Singh that people who live in glass houses should not throw stones at others while refusing to entertain his plea seeking the transfer of the inquiries/case against him outside Maharashtra to be investigated by an independent agency. He alleged that the state government is trying to frame him for levelling corruption charges against NCP leader Anil Deshmukh, who had to resign as Home Minister. Along with Mr. Singh's petition, the bench of Justices Hemant Gupta and V. Ramasubramanian was also considering an application filed by Mumbai Police Inspector Bhimraj Rohidas Gach, who accused Mr. Singh, in turn, of corruption and vindictiveness. Mr. Gach, represented by senior advocate S.B. Tailkar and advocate Vipin Nair, accused his former boss of having tried to silence him by framing fake cases against him. It is commonly said that people who live in glass houses should not throw stones at others, Justice Gupta told senior advocate Mahesh Jethmalani, appearing for Mr. Singh. Mr. Jethmalani raised an objection to the comment, saying it was a prejudicial statement and amounted to prejudging the case. The court, however, was not impressed. Alleges frame-up bid. Mr. Singh alleged that the government had instituted departmental inquiries against him as an act of reprisal for his complaint about Mr. Deshmukh. Solicitor General Tushar Mehta was present in court for the CBI. However, the court saw it differently. You Singh are part of the Maharashtra IPS cadre. You have served the state for 30 years, and now you don't have confidence in your own state. It is shocking. It is a shocking allegation you are making, Justice Gupta addressed Mr. Jethmalani. The senior lawyer said there were other police officers in Maharashtra who, like his client, had been victimized by the government. He claimed that the Maharashtra DGP had approached him as a mentor to give up on his complaint. Schools to start from July 1 with bridge courses. Department of Public Instruction guidelines for alternative education. Education experts have labeled the new guidelines vague. File photo Sriram Ma. Staff reporter Bengaluru. With schools unlikely to hold physical classes in the coming months, the Department of Public Instruction, DPI, has released a detailed set of guidelines for alternative education for the upcoming academic year, which will begin on July 1. It has also decided to conduct bridge courses in the month of July. In a circular issued on Friday, the DPI instructed schools to conduct bridge courses for students in all grades and in all subjects, too. Teachers have to conduct a recap of the lessons taught last year that can be done using practice sheets, both online and offline. Digital divide. The DPI has also issued instructions to schools to adopt and execute these guidelines, keeping in mind a student's access to the internet, laptops, and smartphones. V. Anbukumar, Commissioner for Public Instruction, said, "This year, we want to have a structured approach and ensure that no student is left behind. Schools need to divide students into two categories: those who have access to the internet, smartphones and television, and those that do not." The department has decided to conduct lessons on all mediums, on YouTube, DD Chandana, radio, and so on. Education experts are disappointed with the guidelines, which they criticized as vague. Niranjan Arathya VP, Senior Fellow, Centre for Child and Law, National Law School of India University, said that the operational aspects of learning have not been specified clearly. The guidelines are very vague and do not have many details. There was a need for a more holistic approach, and the department needed to come up with concrete solutions for different school managements and different districts, he said. The guidelines underscored the need for student profiles and regular assessments. "We are gearing up for a third wave of COVID-19 and want to conduct regular assessments so that the students can be graded even if the final examination cannot be held in 2022, said officials. Schools have been asked to collect and record the education qualifications of parents as well, so that volunteers can be arranged to help students if their parents are unable to do so. Dalit poet Siddhalingayya passes away. Dr. Siddhalingayya. Staff reporter, Bengaluru. Noted Dalit poet Dr. Siddhalingayya, 67, passed away on Friday evening, losing his fight against COVID-19. He had been admitted to Manipal hospitals for over a month, diagnosed with severe COVID-19 pneumonia and multiple organ failure. He succumbed to his illness on Friday. He is survived by his wife, who also was afflicted by the infection but recovered, a daughter and a son. Born in 1953 in Mankanebili, Magadhi, Dr. Siddhalingayya was one of the prominent Dalit voices of the state. He was one of the co-founders of Dalit Sangharsh Samithi. Dr. Siddhalingayya taught Kannada at Bangalore University. He was nominated member of the Karnataka Legislative Council for 2 terms during 1988 to 2001. He was awarded Pampa Award, the highest literary award of the state, besides several others. He chaired the 81st Kannada Sahitya Samlana in 2015. Many leaders, including Prime Minister Narendra Modi, have condoled his death. Karnataka HC upholds CCI's order to investigate Amazon, Flipkart. This relates to allegation of anti-competitive agreements. Special Correspondent, Bengaluru. In a setback to e-commerce majors Amazon and Flipkart, the Karnataka High Court on Friday upheld the Competition Commission of India's January 2020 order to conduct an investigation through its Director General into whether the companies had entered into anti-competitive agreements in violation of the provisions of the Competition Act 2002. Justice P.S. Dinesh Kumar passed the order while dismissing the petitions filed by Amazon Seller Services Private Limited, and Flipkart Internet Private Ltd. The e-commerce companies had questioned January 13 order of the CCI, which had ordered probe through its Director General. It is expected that an order directing investigation be supported by some reasoning, which the Commission has fulfilled. Therefore, it would be unwise to prejudge the issues raised by the petitioners in these writ petitions at this stage and scuttle the investigation. Therefore, the impugned order does not call for any interference, the court said. While vacating the stay granted in February 2020 on CCI's January 13, 2020 order for investigation, the High Court said that an order, passed by the Commission for Investigation under Section 26(1) of the Act, is an administrative direction to one of its wings departmentally and without entering upon any adjudicatory process. On contention of the companies that CCI had not given them prior notices before ordering investigation, the court said that the Section 26(1) of the Act does not mention about issuance of any notice to any party before or at the time of formation of an opinion by the Commission on the basis of information received by it requiring investigation into certain agreements and dominant position of enterprise. The High Court also agreed with the contention of the CCI that there is no bar on conducting a parallel investigation by its DG when the Enforcement Directorate is conducting a probe against the two companies on the allegation of violation of Foreign Exchange Management Act, FEMA, 1999. The CCI had acted on a complaint by Delhi Vyapar Mahasan, DVM, which had alleged that Amazon and Flipkart were giving preference to select sellers, and this has led to foreclosure of non-preferred sellers from the online marketplaces, offering deep discounts by indulging in anti-competitive agreements. The High Court, on February 14, 2020, had passed an interim order staying the CCI's order. Following this, the CCI had approached the Apex Court, which in October 2020 had asked the CCI to approach the High Court. With Friday's order, the Director General can proceed with the investigation and submit a report to the CCI. Expect restrictions till year-end. Experts are against allowing gatherings, public rallies, sit-ins/dharnas, fairs, fests. Police reported an increase in traffic on Friday. Sudhakar Jain. Afshan Yasmin. Although the second wave of COVID-19 appears to be subsiding, it is going to be a long wait for return of the pre-lockdown days in Karnataka, say experts. They warn that people will have to learn to live with some restrictions in place even beyond December. The state's COVID-19 Technical Advisory Committee, TAC, that has recommended staggered unlocking in its report submitted to the government, has made it clear that all social, political, and religious gatherings, public rallies, sit-ins/dharnas, fairs, and festivals should not be allowed in all of 2021. Besides, it has recommended that all elections that involve canvassing and rallies or any other superspreading event should not be held in 2021. High-risk places. Activities and places having high risk, such as cinema halls, pubs, and bars, should be the last to be opened up, the report stated, adding that district administrations should impose stricter restrictions as and when such a need arises. CN Manjunath, Nodal Officer for Labs and Testing in the state's COVID-19 Task Force, said while it is advisable to continue commercial activities after June, people should not become complacent. Going by our experience in the second wave and with the third wave expected in October-November, restrictions on superspreading events should continue even beyond December. Whether the government eases such restrictions or not, people should continue following precautions. Masks should become a part of our attire, the doctor said. TAC member Giridhar R. Babu, who heads Life Course Epidemiology at the Public Health Foundation of India in Bengaluru, said restrictions are essential if lives have to be saved. This is how it has been the world over. Total lockdown has not been lifted in the UK even after the situation has eased. A combination of containment measures and restrictions are required whenever the cases are high and health systems are overwhelmed, he said. After seeing the high number of deaths in the second wave, we, as a society, should be more responsible. Only way out is continuing aggressive testing and expanding vaccination coverage, he added. Live with Curbs. V. Ravi, TAC member and nodal officer for genomic confirmation of SARS-CoV-2 in Karnataka, said, all COVID-19 appropriate behavior and restrictions related to crowding have to be continued for the next 1 year, or until nearly 90% of the population is vaccinated. Health and Medical Education Minister K. Sudhakar said the nature of the pandemic and the virus is such that none of us are safe until each one of us is safe. Now, we have set a target to vaccinate every adult by the end of this year. So, there is a need for all of us to learn to live with this virus and make necessary changes in our lifestyle. We cannot expect our lives to be completely back to pre-COVID-19 level normalcy at least in the near future, he said. He said that government will take an appropriate call on imposing restrictions from time to time depending on the situation. NGT pulls up DPCC over illegal go-downs, no permits for units in Shahadara. Staff reporter, New Delhi. The National Green Tribunal, NGT, has pulled up the Delhi Pollution Control Committee, DPCC, over operation of go-downs in Shahadara without requisite permissions, leading to noise and air pollution. A bench headed by NGT chairperson Justice Adarsh Kumar Goyal observed that the DPCC had failed to address relevant issues in the report furnished by it. DPCC has filed a report in a careless manner, unmindful of its statutory duties. This calls for accountability of the chairman and the member secretary of the DPCC. Before taking action against the officers, we grant one more opportunity to take effective remedial action for enforcement of rule of law and environmental norms in coordination with other concerned authorities, it said. In case of non-compliance, the erring officials would be held accountable and dealt with sternly, the bench added, while noting that the DPCC had taken action against only 2 go-downs instead of all the units that were in violation of the master plan. The directions came on a plea moved by petitioner Sunil Kumar against the operation of illegal garbage go-downs in Sanya Vihar. The plea had contended that the units were releasing dangerous oxides and leading to noise and air pollution. Pregnant woman moves HC for jab inclusion. Court disposed of the plea after Centre's counsel said it will take a decision on it. Press Trust of India, New Delhi. A pregnant woman on Friday approached the Delhi High Court seeking direction to the centre to include pregnant women in COVID-19 vaccination drive on priority basis. The court was informed by the central government's counsel that the government is seized of the issue and will take a decision on the same. Noting the statement made by the centre's counsel, Justice Amit Bansal said no further orders are required and disposed of the woman's petition. Advocate Vasudhachachi, representing the woman, said the petitioner is in advanced stage of pregnancy and desires to get vaccinated on priority basis. She sought direction to the government to issue a fresh notification to include pregnant women in the vaccination drive on priority basis. NTJ recommendations. Additional Solicitor General Chetan Sharma and Central Government Standing Counsel Anurag Ahluwalia said National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization, NTJ, has issued a notification on May 28 in which various recommendations were made, including that all pregnant women visiting antenatal care may be informed about the risks and benefits associated with the COVID-19 vaccines, Covishield and Covaxin, available in the country. Based on the information provided, a pregnant woman may be offered the available COVID-19 vaccine at the nearest center, and the vaccine can be given anytime during the pregnancy, the NTJ recommendations said, adding that all lactating women are eligible to receive COVID-19 vaccines anytime after delivery. Punjab police seize huge cache of foreign-made pistols. Smuggler allegedly linked to Pak-based terror outfits arrested. Senior police officers inspect the cache of arms and ammunition in Amritsar on Friday. PTI. Special Correspondent Chandigarh. The Punjab police on Friday said they have seized a huge cache of foreign-made pistols and arrested a weapons smuggler, allegedly linked with Pakistan-based terrorist outfits and anti-India pro-Khalistani elements based in the US, Canada, and the UK. Director General of Police Dinkar Gupta said the weapons were meant for carrying out terror activities in various parts of India. He said Jagjit Singh, 25, a resident of Batala, was arrested from near Kothanangal in Amritsar on Thursday night by a team of Punjab Internal Security Wing. The team recovered from him 2 nylon bags containing 48 pistols of different foreign makes and bores, along with magazines and ammunition. The cache included 19 pistols of 9mm Zygona made in Turkey, 37 magazines and 45 rounds, 9 pistols of .30 bore, made in China, and 22 magazines, 19 pistols of .30 bore, Star Mark, 38 magazines and 148 rounds, and 1 pistol of 9mm, Beretta Italian, and 2 magazines. Orders from gangster. The DGP said preliminary investigation showed that Jagjit had been directed by former gangster criminal Dharmanjot Singh alias Dharmanjot Kalan, to collect and conceal the weapons consignment. He had been in touch with Dharmanjot, at present based in the US, during his stay in Dubai from 2017 to December 2020. Dharmanjot had reportedly tasked Jagjit to wait for further instructions for the delivery of the pistols, said the DGP, adding that open-ended warrants for Dharmanjot, a proclaimed offender in the state, had been obtained. Bru refugee rehabilitation in Tripura hits green panel hurdle. Response sought on complaint about resettlement in forest. A Bru refugee in Tripura. Special Correspondent Guwahati. The National Green Tribunal, NGT, has sought replies from the Forest Department and a district administration in Tripura on a complaint that Bru refugees from adjoining Mizoram were being resettled in a forest. On June 9, the Kolkata-based Eastern Zonal Bench of the NGT directed the Principal Secretary of Tripura's Forest Department, the District Magistrate of North Tripura District and other officials to submit a report on the rehabilitation plan by July 14. The order was issued on the basis of a complaint by Daneshwar Debnath, who cited an e-tender floated by the Tripura government on November 4, 2020, seeking certain constructions within a forest area in North Tripura district. The complainant, who resides in the area, said the construction for resettling the Brus would be in a 250-hectare green belt. He pointed out that this would be in violation of Section 2 of the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. In our opinion, matter requires consideration, the bench of judicial member B. Amitst Halkar and expert member Saibul Dasgupta said, allowing the complainant to implead the state's principal chief conservator of forest and head of forest force. More than 40,000 Brus, also called Rings, have been living in the Tripura relief camps since 1997 after escaping ethnic violence in Mizoram. About 7,000 refugees returned to Mizoram after 9 phases of repatriation till November 30, 2019. The rest stayed put, citing security reasons. The repatriation stalemate ended with the signing of the quadripartite agreement in January 16, 2020, among representatives of Brus, the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Tripura and Mizoram governments. Italy has paid 10 Indian rupees crore, Centre tells SC Court, worried if Kin will fritter away money, it will pass orders on Tuesday. A file photo of Italian Marines Salvatore Girone and Massimiliano Lattori in Kochi.pti. Krishnadas Rajagopal, New Delhi. The central government informed the Supreme Court on Friday that Italy had paid 10 Indian rupees crore compensation for dispersal among the families of fishermen shot dead/injured by 2 Italian Marines detailed on Enrico Lexi, an Italian-flagged vessel in 2012, who mistook them for pirates off the coast of Kerala. Earlier this year, the government approached the court for closure of the pending trial against Marines Salvatore Girone and Massimiliano Lattori, following a United National Tribunal decision that the duo would be tried in Italy. On April 9, the court said it would consider passing an order to quash the criminal proceedings only after Italy deposited 10 Indian rupees crore as compensation for the bereaved families of the fishermen. Italy have deposited 10 Indian rupees crore. This is compensation over and above the ex gratia amount paid earlier to the families. We have accepted the award of the tribunal as a nation. Kerala has filed an affidavit, saying 10 Indian rupees crore is acceptable to it. The affidavit has annexed letters of consent from the families also. Solicitor General Tushar Mehta, for the centre, submitted. For Italy, Advocate Suhail Dutt, submitted that India's jurisdiction over the Marines had stopped as soon as Italy paid the compensation amount. 4 Indian rupees crore each to 2 families. The court, however, asked how the money would be apportioned among the families. The lawyer for the victims' side said the 2 families would get 4 Indian rupees crore each, while the owner of the boat on which the fishermen were sailing would get 2 Indian rupees crore. Kerala government lawyer, Senior Advocate K.N. Balagopal, said compensation could be paid to the victims through the state government. The court expressed concern about whether the money received as compensation would be frittered away once it reached the families. The bench asked whether any orders should be passed to protect the capital, like putting it in a fixed deposit, for the time being. 4 crore is not a small amount. It should not be frittered away. How do we protect their families' interests? Justice Shah asked. The victim's lawyer said the legal heirs of the fishermen have attained the age of majority. Mr. Balagopal said the state had earlier conducted a preliminary verification of the legal heirs and found them responsible. The money the families had earlier received as ex gratia payments had been utilized well. Justice Shah suggested that the Supreme Court dispose of the case by asking the Kerala High Court to disburse the amount. The bench finally shifted the case to Tuesday for passing orders. In April, the Supreme Court directed that the Republic of Italy transfer the compensation amount to an account number, which would be handed over to it by the Ministry of External Affairs. The ministry would in turn deposit the money with the Supreme Court. The International Tribunal's finding that the Marines had immunity came 7 years after the Supreme Court ordered the centre to proceed with the investigation and trial of the Marines in a decision on January 18, 2013. The Supreme Court had ordered the centre to set up a special court to try the case. Prior to the Supreme Court verdict, the Kerala High Court had also found that the Marines enjoyed no immunity. HC, why can't centre start door-to-door vaccination? Court cites Kerala and J&K as examples. Special Correspondent Mumbai. The Bombay High Court on Friday asked the union government if it has different policies for different states on door-to-door vaccination. A division bench of Chief Justice Deepankar Dutta and Justice G.S. Kulkarni said it was unable to understand what the centre's problem was in starting door-to-door vaccination when Kerala and Jammu and Kashmir were doing it successfully. Additional Solicitor General Anil Singh told the court that COVID-19 had a national impact and all states needed to work in coordination with the centre. The centre formulates guidelines and it is expected of all state governments to follow them and update them from time to time. The court, however, told Mr. Singh to take a uniform policy decision. We want to save as many lives as possible. We are not able to understand what the centre's problem is. Why don't you communicate with these states, and if it appeals to you, you can ask other states to start the drive, the court said. It asked the government to take a sound decision. BMC Commissioner said chase the virus. It was a catchy phrase, the court told the Corporations Council. Did you have to take the permission from the union for it? The court said it was happy with the job being done by the BMC and asked why it was hesitant about introducing door-to-door vaccination. Centre takes steps to engage with J&K parties. If all goes well, regional leaders may travel to Delhi for talks, say sources. Valley allies, Mehbooba Mufti and Farooq Abdullah at a recent meeting of the Gupkar Alliance in Srinagar. Nisar Ahmed. Pirzada Ashik Srinagar. 20 months after the union government ended Jammu and Kashmir's special constitutional position, serious spadework is on, for the first time, to rope in the mainstream political parties of the Union Territory, UT, especially the Kashmir-based grouping, the People's Alliance for Gupkar Declaration, PAGD, to engage with New Delhi and meet the BJP's top leadership in the coming weeks. Top sources privy to the parleys on the back channels told The Hindu that people mandated by the centre are in touch with the top leaders of the regional political parties of J&K for many weeks. It included the region's oldest political party, the National Conference, NC, whose president Dr. Farooq Abdullah heads the Gupkar Alliance. Besides, People's Conference's Sajid Lone and J&K Apni Party's Altaf Bukhari may also be taken on board. The situation in Kashmir has not changed since the August 5, 2019 action by the centre to abrogate all special provisions of Article 370. A bid to dislodge and discredit the traditional leaders and create a new crop of leadership in Kashmir has not yielded any desired results till date, which was evident during the District Development Council polls conducted last year. The sources said that if all went well, J&K leaders were likely to travel to New Delhi and hold a meeting with top BJP leadership. The talks were likely to revolve around the return of statehood status to the Jammu and Kashmir and early assembly elections. For now, J&K remains under the centre's rule since 2018, after the BJP pulled out of the alliance with the People's Democratic Party, PDP. Dr. Abdullah had dropped broad hints and showed his readiness to engage after the Gupkar Alliance partners met at the official residence of PDP President Mehbooba Mufti in Srinagar on June 9. We have not closed any doors for talks. If invited, we may look into it, he told reporters. The sources said all the 5 parties associated with the Gupkar Alliance, including the PDP, did discuss the offer of engagement from New Delhi. Delimitation process. Dr. Abdullah had softened his position on delimitation and was likely to engage in the process, set off to create more constituencies ahead of assembly polls. The NC MPs, who have abstained from the Commission's meetings so far, are likely to be allowed to make recommendations and will be given due consideration, the sources said. Ms. Mufti, whose uncle and PDP General Secretary Sartaj Madani, close aide Naeem Akhtar and party's youth wing president Wahidur Rahman Para remain behind the bars, has also shared her viewpoint on the subject and stressed the need to prove the intention ahead of any grand optics. If the outreach by the centre manages to get the regional parties on board for a meeting, it is also likely to ease the pressure off from Prime Minister Narendra Modi from international and neighbouring countries on Kashmir. Any move to allow local parties to express their politics again will be seen as a confidence-building measure both in Srinagar as well as Islamabad. Prashant Kishore's meeting with Sharad Pawar raises eyebrows. NCP leaders remain tight-lipped on what was discussed. Sharad Pawar. Staff reporter Mumbai. A meeting between Nationalist Congress Party, NCP, Chief Sharad Pawar and former political strategist Prashant Kishore, which lasted for over 3 hours, has raised eyebrows across political circles in Maharashtra. Mr. Kishore in the 2019 State Assembly polls had worked with the Shiv Sena, which is now in alliance with the NCP in a tripartite Maha Vikas Aghadi (MVA) government. When asked about the meeting, Mr. Kishore replied saying it was a private lunch. He did not elaborate further. The meeting took place a day after Mr. Pawar addressed party workers on the party's 22nd Foundation Day. The NCP chief had said that he did not care about the discussions on the stability of this government. Nobody had thought that we can work together with Shiv Sena. But we gave the option and it was accepted by the people. Leaders of all three parties are moving in the right direction, keeping the commitment to the government, he said. Mr. Kishore, who helped the Trinamool Congress in the party's astounding win in the West Bengal elections last month, has already declared that he will not be working as a political strategist anymore. Speculations are rife that he may enter politics. His meeting with Mr. Pawar in the context of the ongoing developments in national politics is said to be with an eye on the 2024 elections. NCP sources were tight-lipped about the meeting between two. The meeting was reportedly attended by NCP MP Supriya Sule and party MLA Rohit Pawar. But when asked, Ms. Sule denied being an attendee at the meeting. Mr. Pawar did not respond to a phone call. A senior NCP minister from the state government said that Mr. Pawar had held the meeting to ask about Mr. Kishore's experience in West Bengal. There was discussion on national politics. Everyone knows that Mr. Kishore is no longer in the good books of the BJP, Bharatiya Janata Party, and is most likely to be in the opposition camp, the minister said. How will food reach migrants without ration cards, asks SC Court pulls up Center for Delaying Database to identify and register workers. Desperate situation, migrant workers from Bihar at the New Delhi railway station. Sushil Kumar Verma. Krishnadas Rajagopal. The Supreme Court on Friday asked the centre how it intended to take food to crores of migrant labourers who have no ration cards. How will food reach migrant labourers without ration cards? A bench of Justices Ashok Bhushan and M.R. Shah addressed Solicitor General Tushar Mehta and Additional Solicitor General Aishwarya Bhatti, for the centre. The court said the schemes rolled out so far seemed to cover only ration card holders. Ms. Bhatti explained that the centre had kept its best foot forward with the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, which covers 80 crore poor identified as beneficiaries under the National Food Security Act. The scheme provides 5 kilograms of free food grains to every person for May and June. It intends to help the poor tide over the economic disruptions caused by the pandemic. 8 lakh metric tons of food grains have already been given, she added. No doubt you the centre are providing food. No doubt some migrant labourers have ration cards. But we are only bothered about those who do not have them. We want to know about your mechanism to identify and provide food for people who do not have ration cards, Justice Bhushan addressed the government side. State's role. Ms. Bhatti said the centre was only in charge of making available or procuring food grains. The states had to distribute the food within their territories. The law officer said the centre was ready to give the states whatever they wanted. Senior advocate Dushyant Dave, who appeared for some activists along with advocate Prashant Bhushan, said the centre was leaving them the poor without ration cards to the mercy of the states. Those without ration cards cannot be allowed to die. The economic situation is far more dire now, Mr. Dave said. Mr. Mehta strongly objected to Mr. Dave's submissions, saying he was dramatizing the issue. In the previous hearing, Mr. Bhushan had submitted that the centre had last year recorded 8 crore migrant workers without ration cards. The states had identified 2.8 crore of them. At this point, the court pulled up the government for delaying the completion of a national database to identify and register migrant workers. The government said the delay had something to do with the software. The database would have helped the centre work in tandem with the states to identify migrant labourers and provide them timely welfare during the pandemic. The government side said the database would be ready in the next 3 or 4 months. Why do you need 3 or 4 months? You are only preparing a database portal, Justice Bhushan asked. Ms. Bhatti explained that the portal would be an end-to-end one, which would not only function as a database but also help in tracking and monitoring benefits meant for migrant labourers. It will be a self-sustaining, self-managing portal, Mr. Mehta assured. USFTA move won't affect India v.K. Paul responds to rejection of U.S. nod for Covaxin. Reaching out, a worker holding Covaxin vials at a vaccination camp in Chennai for differently abled people. File photo. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. The rejection by the United States Food and Drug Administration, USFTA, of the emergency use application of Bharat Biotech's Covaxin has no impact on policies in India, Dr. V.K. Paul, NITI Aayog member, Health, said at a Union Health Ministry press conference on Friday. Every country has its parameter for approval of vaccinations for its population despite the world sharing a common scientific framework for approval. India also follows its own regulatory process for approval that is tailor-made for our population. It's their decision, it should be respected. Our regulator has endorsed this vaccine and there is no impact on use of Covaxin in our national program, he stated, noting that Covaxin Phase 3 clinical trial data would be published in the next 7 to 8 days. We expect that the Covaxin manufacturers will be able to comply with the regulator's requirement. Our regulator has approved this vaccine. We have enough data on safety and efficacy, he said. Dr. Paul said the Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR, was preparing for a national survey. The ICMR will begin work for next Sero survey this month. But if we want to protect our geographies, we won't have to depend on national Sero survey alone, we'll have to encourage states for Sero surveys too, he said. Suggestions to reduce the gap between the two doses of Covishield and non-requirement of vaccination for those who have recovered from COVID-19 are welcome, he said, adding that revisions can be made as per data analysis and consultations. In a release on Friday, the Health Ministry said the expectation that vaccine wastage should be 1% or less is not at all unreasonable. The vaccines being used now did not have an open vial policy, i.e., they have to be used within a stipulated time once a vial was opened. The vaccinators were advised to mark the date and time of opening each vial and all opened vials should be used or discarded within 4 hours of opening. Several states have organized COVID-19 vaccination in such a way that not only is there no wastage but they are able to extract more doses from the vial and thus show a negative wastage. Hence, the expectation that vaccine wastage should be 1% or less is not at all unreasonable. It is reasonable, desirable, and achievable, said the release. Online module to map out of school kids center takes note of disruptions due to COVID-19. A good step, through the module, children will be connected to mainstream education by training centers. File photo. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. With COVID-19 related disruptions to education leading to higher levels of dropouts, the center has set up a module to map out of school children and connect them to mainstream education through special training centers. In a letter to state governments on Friday, Education Ministry Joint Secretary, Manish Garg, directed them to upload data about all out-of-school children at the block level for monitoring purposes. In order to facilitate age-appropriate admission of out-of-school children in the age group of 6 to 14 years in regular schools, financial provisions are made in the Samagra Shiksha scheme for arranging special training to bridge their learning gaps and mainstreaming them in schools, said the letter. The online module, it said, would allow for the mapping of the children with the nearest special training centers to provide bridge courses. For out-of-school children in the 16 to 18 years of age group and belonging to socially and economically disadvantaged group, financial assistance has been made available for the first time from the year 2021 to 22 to continue their education through open/distance learning mode, it added. In January, the Education Ministry had directed states to conduct comprehensive door-to-door surveys to identify children who were out of school and migrant students affected by COVID-19 disruptions. They were told to prepare an action plan to prevent increased dropouts, lower enrollments, loss of learning and deterioration in the gains made in providing universal access, quality, and equity in recent years. Schools were also asked to relax detention norms in order to prevent dropouts. Thank you. International news. G7 to pledge 1 billion vaccine shots for world U.S. President Biden commits 500 mn doses while British PM Johnson commits another 100 mn. Talks begin. G7 leaders meeting at the Carbis Bay Hotel in Cornwall, England, on Friday. Apkevin Lamarck. Associated Press. Carbis Bay. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson greeted world leaders at the Group of Seven, G7, summit on Friday, offering elbow bumps to dignitaries gathered for the first time since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The virus was set to dominate their discussions, with leaders of the Wealthy Democracies Club are set to commit to sharing at least 1 billion vaccine shots with struggling countries. A commitment from U.S. President Joe Biden to share 500 million doses and one from Mr. Johnson for another 100 million shots set the stage for the G7 meeting in southwest England, where leaders will pivot Friday from their family photo by the seaside directly into a session on building back better from COVID-19. "We're going to help lead the world out of this pandemic working alongside our global partners," Mr. Biden said. The G7 also includes Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. The leaders hope the meeting in the resort of Carbis Bay will also energize the global economy. Despite the moody skies, the group walked away their photo as cheerful as children who had just built a sand castle. Led by Mr. Johnson, French President Emmanuel Macron threw his arm around Mr. Biden's shoulder. Talks were animated, but inaudible. Global minimum tax. On Friday, they are set to formally embrace a global minimum tax of at least 15% on multinational corporations, following an agreement reached a week ago by their finance ministers. The minimum is meant to stop companies from using tax havens to shift profits and to avoid taxes. It represents a potential win for the Biden administration, which has proposed a global minimum tax as a way to pay for infrastructure projects, in addition to creating an alternative that could remove some European countries' digital services taxes that largely hit U.S. tech firms. But the endorsement from the G7 is just one step in the process. The hope is to get many more countries to sign on a fraught proposal in nations whose economies are based on attracting business with low corporate taxes. For Mr. Johnson, the first G7 summit in 2 years last year's was scuttled by the pandemic is a chance to set out his vision of a post-Brexit global Britain as a mid-sized country with an outsized role in international problem-solving. It's also an opportunity to underscore the U.K.U.S. bond, an alliance often called the special relationship but that Mr. Johnson said he prefers to call the indestructible relationship. Climate change is also a top issue on the agenda, and hundreds of protesters gathered in Cornwall to urge the leaders to take action. Demonstrators deployed a barge off the coast with 2 large inflatable figures depicting Mr. Biden and Mr. Johnson on board. At another protest, demonstrators carried flags that read G7 drowning in promises and action not words. The official summit business kicked off on Friday, with the customary formal greeting and a socially distanced group photo. Myanmar violence escalating, creating rights catastrophe, UN at least 860 civilians killed, says Rights Office, citing reports. Michelle Bachelet. Agence France Presse Geneva. The UN rights chief said on Friday that violence was escalating across Myanmar, warning that the country had plunged into a human rights catastrophe since the February 1 coup. Pointing to reported military buildup in several regions of the country, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet called for a halt to the already spiraling violence to avert even greater loss of life and a deepening humanitarian emergency. In just over 4 months, Myanmar has gone from being a fragile democracy to a human rights catastrophe, she said in a statement, adding that the military leadership was singularly responsible for the crisis. The country has been in turmoil since the generals ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi on February 1. The UN Rights Office pointed on Friday to credible reports showing that at least 860 civilians had been killed in a brutal crackdown by security forces on near-daily protests against the coup. Fighting has flared in several communities, especially in townships that have seen a high death toll at the hands of police, and some locals have formed defense forces. Ms. Bachelet pointed to intensifying violence in many parts of Myanmar, including Kayah State, Chin State, and Kachin State. Human shields. State security forces have continued to use heavy weaponry, including air strikes, against armed groups and against civilians and civilian objects, including Christian churches, she said. She pointed to credible reports that security forces have used civilians as human shields, shelled civilian homes and churches, and blocked humanitarian access, including by attacking aid workers. Johnson hails U.K.'s indestructible ties with U.S. He plays down Biden's concerns over British attempt to reverse the Northern Ireland Protocol. Agence France-Presse London. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson hailed the U.K.U.'s relationship as indestructible after his first meeting with President Joe Biden ahead of the G7 Leaders Summit on Friday. "It's a relationship, you can call it the deep and meaningful relationship, whatever you want, the indestructible relationship," Mr. Johnson said. "It's a relationship that has endured for a very long time, and has been an important part of peace and prosperity both in Europe and around the world." During their meeting on Thursday, the two leaders discussed about 25 subjects in some detail, including the Brexit-induced disruption in Northern Ireland, he said. Mr. Johnson played down the displeasure of Mr. Biden, who is proud of his Irish origins, over London's attempts to reverse the Northern Ireland Protocol, which seeks to avoid the return of a border with EU member Ireland but which has disrupted trade between Britain and Northern Ireland. "Everybody has a massive interest in making sure that we keep the essential symmetry of the Good Friday Agreement, which ended 3 decades of conflict in the British-ruled province." In his meeting with Mr. Biden, Mr. Johnson said he also raised the case of British teenager Harry Dunn, who was killed in a road accident caused by the wife of an American diplomat. She fled the country, claiming diplomatic immunity. Mr. Biden was actively engaged in the case, Mr. Johnson said. "As you know, he has his own personal reasons for feeling very deeply about the issue," he said, referring to Mr. Biden losing his first wife and 1-year-old daughter in a car accident in 1972. Russia to supply high-tech satellite to Iran, report it will allow monitoring of West Asia. Agence France-Presse Washington. Russia is set to deliver an advanced satellite system to Iran that will vastly improve its spying capabilities, according to a U.S. media report. Moscow is preparing to give Iran a Canopus V satellite with a high-resolution camera, The Washington Post reported on Thursday. It will allow the Islamic Republic to monitor facilities of its adversaries across the West Asia, the newspaper said, citing current and former U.S. and West Asian officials. The satellite would be launched in Russia and contain Russian-made hardware, according to officials. Netanyahu lashes out at opponents he accuses them of betraying voters. Benjamin Netanyahu. Associated Press Jerusalem. Are in what appear to be the final days of his historic 12-year rule, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not leaving the political stage quietly. The longtime leader is accusing his opponents of betraying their voters, and some have needed special security protection. Mr. Netanyahu says he is the victim of a deep state conspiracy. "They are uprooting the good and replacing it with the bad and dangerous," Mr. Netanyahu told Channel 20 TV station this week. "I fear for the destiny of the nation." Mr. Netanyahu and his loyalists are making a final desperate push to try to prevent a new government from taking office on Sunday. With his options running out, it has also provided a preview of Mr. Netanyahu as opposition leader. "We are witnesses to the greatest election fraud in the history of the country," he claimed at a Likud meeting this week. He has long dismissed the corruption trial as a witch hunt fueled by fake news. UAE working on Gupta's extradition. Agence France-Presse Pretoria. South Africa said on Friday it was on the cusp of finalizing an extradition treaty with the UAE, where 3 brothers accused of graft under former President Jacob Zuma are suspected to be living. Justice Minister Ronald Lamola told an online news briefing that ratification of the deal will be finalized on July 10 and take effect a month after. The Indian-born trio Ajay, Atul, and Rajesh Gupta were at the center of a corruption scandal that stained Mr. Zuma's 9-year tenure. They won lucrative contracts with state companies and were allegedly even allowed to choose cabinet ministers. They fled South Africa shortly thereafter. China-Sri Lanka Friendship Hospital opened built with a Chinese grant of $60 million, it specializes in kidney ailments. Health diplomacy, the China-Sri Lanka Friendship Hospital in Polonnaruwa. Chinese Embassy/Twitter. Mira Srinivasan Colombo. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa on Friday inaugurated the China-Sri Lanka Friendship Hospital in Polonnaruwa, built with a Chinese grant of $60 million. The hospital, located in Sri Lanka's north-central province, will specialize in treating kidney ailments, a widely prevalent and recurring concern in the region, especially among farmers. For years now, residents of this agriculture-intensive area have been frequently diagnosed with a kidney disorder that the country's medical experts have identified as chronic kidney disease of unknown etiology, CKD, a condition for which causal factors remain unknown. Following a request from former President Maithripala Sirisena during his time in office, he is from and currently represents Polonnaruwa in Parliament, the Chinese government provided the grant. The facility was built within 30 months, a press release from the President's office said. The hospital, said to be one of the largest in South Asia for nephrology care, with a capacity of 200 beds, follows China's earlier grant projects in Sri Lanka, also built as large public spaces, such as the well-known Bandaranaike Memorial International Conference Hall in Colombo, that Beijing gifted in the 1970s, and the Nelam Pokuna Mahinda Rajapaksa threat, that China funded during former President Mahinda Rajapaksa's time in office. In addition to sanctioning loans and a currency swap facility worth more than $2 billion since the pandemic struck last year, China also announced $90 million grant to Sri Lanka in October last year, following a request from President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, when a high-powered Chinese delegation visited the island nation. Meanwhile, the Jaffna Cultural Center, built with Indian assistance of $11.5 million, whose construction was completed a year ago, awaits inauguration as authorities iron out issues over the administrative setup to run the center. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, speaking in February at an election rally in Chennai, ahead of the Tamil Nadu Assembly polls, said he hoped to open the center in Jaffna soon. India's grant assistance to Sri Lanka totals about $570 million. Thank you. Economy News. Review GST SOP's timing, urges Industry. GST Council set to decide on rate cuts for crucial COVID-19 related vaccines, medicines, equipment. For parity, industry wants retrospective applicability of IGST waiver on material imported to donate. Special arrangement. Vikas Thut, New Delhi. While the GST Council meets on Saturday to discuss tax cuts on critical COVID-19 related material including vaccines, medicines, and equipment, industry donors are urging a rethink on the timing for the applicability of the integrated GST, IGST, exemption announced on imported relief supplies after the Council's last meeting. At its May 28 meeting, the Council had decided to extend the IGST exemption granted on relief material received free from abroad as donations to state-approved entities, effective since May 3, to those wanting to make such donations after purchasing the material overseas. The May 31 notification on the grant of this waiver was, however, prospective, and tax experts said a judicial intervention may be required to make it applicable on imports made earlier amid the surging second wave. Several firms including MNCs had imported oxygen equipment and other supplies urgently for donations to state governments, domestic charities, and hospitals. The date of applicability for the reduced rate will remain a subject matter of debate and judicial intervention may be required, said Abhishek A. Rastogi, partner at Khaitan & Co. The Delhi High Court has taken up a petition challenging the centre's exclusion of such imports from the ad hoc GST exemption for COVID-19 relief material received from abroad. Gujarat and Haryana had introduced schemes to reimburse the IGST paid by domestic entities importing material for free donation in their jurisdictions. Prepared for third wave. Regulatory experts said ensuring parity on the IGST waiver would help India prepare better for a possible third wave, by freeing up resources used in GST levies for fresh donations. Extending exemptions from May 3 would indeed be beneficial, as the duties already paid by the corporates on such imports would be a cost to the companies, and this would bring parity with imports received free of cost, said Mahesh Jaisingh, Deloitte India partner. Industry hopes for a clarification on spends on COVID material, clarifying eligibility of GST input credit, where the material has been used for donations or CSR purposes or used for their employees, he added. Mr. Jaisingh also called for a more dynamic approach to tax exemptions on COVID relief material as the requirements may keep changing. The list of relief material may therefore be updated real-time or kept open-ended, to ensure better preparation during these challenging times, he suggested. Finance Ministry tightens belt, tells ministries to cut controllable expenditure by 20%. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. The Finance Ministry has told ministries to slash controllable spending by 20% and drop other wasteful expenditure, introducing fresh austerity steps amid concerns with breaching the fiscal deficit target for the year following the second COVID-19 wave. Expenditure related to containment of COVID-19 is excluded from the scope of this order. A suggestive list of object heads of controllable expenditure has been shared, that includes advertising and publicity, foreign and domestic travel, office and administrative expenses and overtime allowance. The government has decided that all ministries take steps to curb wasteful expenditure and aim for a 20% reduction in controllable expenditure, the Department of Expenditure wrote in a memo, approved by Finance Secretary T.V. Somanathan, to all ministries. Base year. Urging departments to take steps to curtail all avoidable non-scheme expenditure, the memo has told them to take the expenditure incurred in 2019-20 as the base for this purpose. The Expenditure Department has been directed to review the progress in the matter. The other items where spending may be controlled are general grants in aid, royalty payments, publications, rents and taxes, ration costs, clothing and tentage, minor works, and maintenance. Separately, ministries have also been told to expedite appraisals and clearances for schemes in their domains that need to be extended beyond March this year. Ministries that are yet to seek the requisite expenditure clearances have been given till July to do so, in order to secure funds. No further extension to ongoing schemes and release of funds will be allowed, said the Expenditure Department. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this video as a podcast. Do like, share and comment. Press the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to get new notifications. Thank you. Take care and stay safe. God bless you all. Jai Ma Bharati. To download news and editorials in MP3, follow us on Telegram, Virtual School. The link is provided in the description below.